What would you do if the people who raised you, the ones who preached honesty and morals, ended up breaking every rule they taught you? That question hit me the morning I stepped into my driveway and saw nothing but loose gravel where my brand new car should have been. For a few seconds, I convinced myself I had parked somewhere else, maybe down the street or at my boyfriend Liam's place. But the truth settled in quickly, cold and sharp. My parents took it. The same parents who watched me work 2 jobs, who knew how long I'd saved, who acted like they were proud of me. They stole the one thing that represented my independence. I remember standing there in my scrubs, exhausted from a night shift, trying to steady my breathing while my mind spun. I wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, some emergency that justified it. But deep inside, I knew. They had hinted before. They had guilt-tripped me before. They had praised my hard work while handing everything to my sister Kira. And now, they felt entitled to the car I bled for. When I walked inside, my mom didn't look guilty at all. She acted like borrowing my car without asking was normal, even reasonable. My dad didn't even bother hiding the smugness in his voice. They said I was being dramatic, selfish, ungrateful. They tried to twist it like they always did, making themselves the victims while I stood there trying not to fall apart. It was the same pattern I had grown up with, but this time, it hit different. This time, it was clear they didn't just disrespect me. They didn't see me as a person with boundaries at all. Their calmness scared me more than if they had yelled. They were so confident I'd fold. They thought I'd let it go like every other time. Seeing how little my feelings mattered to them drained something out of me. Something I didn't realize I still had. Hope that they'd ever treat me fairly. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I became someone who had to protect her own life from the people who should have protected her. And as painful as it was, that realization pushed me toward the decision that changed everything. The moment I chose myself over the family that never chose me. For years, I felt like I was moving through life with a weight on my back. But I kept going because I wanted something of my own, something no one could take credit for. Since I was 19, I balanced 2 jobs while trying to keep up with college assignments. I didn't have the free time other people my age enjoyed, but every long shift and every early morning had a purpose. I wanted to build a future without relying on anyone, especially not my parents, who always acted like helping me was some sort of burden. My dad, Dennis, liked to repeat that everything in our house was for the family, but I knew what that really meant. Whenever there was something new, something expensive, something special, it always went straight to my sister Kiera. She never had to struggle. If she needed money, they found it. If she messed something up, they covered it. Meanwhile, I learned to stretch every dollar and make choices they barely noticed. It wasn't jealousy. I had simply accepted that I was the backup plan in a house where she was the main character. Still, I refused to let that stop me. I saved every extra bit I could. Sometimes that meant skipping outings, saying no to small pleasures, or taking on extra hours even when I was drained. Liam, my boyfriend, was the only one who fully understood what I was trying to do. He cheered me on when I felt discouraged and reminded me that my effort would be worth it someday. Hearing that from someone who believed in me gave me strength. And then the day came. After years of grinding, I walked into the dealership and signed for a brand new electric blue Honda Civic. Seeing my name on the paperwork made my heart race in the best way. That car wasn't just transportation. It represented choices I made on my own. Choices I fought for. When I sat in the driver's seat for the first time, I felt something I rarely experienced at home: pride. Driving it off the lot, I imagined a life where I could finally move forward without feeling tied down by old patterns. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would see what I had achieved and feel happy for me. But even in that moment of joy, a small part of me knew they would see it differently. Still, I let myself enjoy the victory. It was the first thing in a long time that felt truly mine. Kira has always been the one everyone rushed to protect, even when her problems came from her own choices. She was 20, but my parents still treated her like she couldn't handle the smallest setback. Every time something went wrong in her life, they stepped in without thinking twice. It didn't matter if she quit something, changed her mind again, or walked away from responsibilities. They always softened the fall for her. I had watched this pattern for years, and even though I didn't agree with it, I learned to stay quiet to avoid arguments. Her most recent issue started when her old car finally gave out. Instead of figuring out a solution herself, she turned it into a dramatic event. She claimed she couldn't continue her influencer work without reliable transportation. To her, taking pictures in cute coffee shops counted as a job, And my parents acted like she was building a serious career. They didn't question her spending or her constant new hobbies. They only looked for ways to keep her comfortable. Soon enough, they started circling around me with suggestions disguised as innocent comments. My mom mentioned how family supports each other. My dad asked if I really needed my car every day. They framed it like a simple favor, but the tone made it clear they expected me to agree. It was the same old pressure, but this time I felt something shift inside me. I didn't want to give up something I worked years to earn, especially not for someone who never considered how her actions affected others. When I told them I wasn't handing over my keys, the room changed instantly. Their expressions tightened, and the warmth disappeared from their voices. It was like I had broken some unspoken rule. Instead of understanding why I said no, they acted offended, as if I had betrayed them. The tension grew so quickly that even walking through the house felt heavy afterward. Kira didn't say much, but the look she gave me said she believed the car should have been hers all along. That silent expectation hit harder than any argument. It was clear she had grown so used to getting whatever she wanted that my refusal felt unnatural to her. For the first time, I saw just how deeply the imbalance in our family ran, and how little my feelings mattered when her comfort was involved. When I pulled into the neighborhood after a long night at the hospital, all I wanted was sleep. My feet hurt, my eyes were heavy, and my only thought was getting inside and resting. But the moment I reached my driveway, everything shifted. The space where my car should have been was completely empty. For a second, I just stared, hoping I was mistaken. I walked around, checked the street, even looked toward the neighbor's house, but the truth hit fast. My car was gone. I went inside feeling a mix of worry and confusion. Before I could ask anything, my mom spoke like nothing unusual had happened. She told me Kira needed the car for some audition across town, as if that explained everything. Her tone was calm, almost dismissive, as if she expected me to simply accept it. I was stunned. My car had been taken without a call or text, and she acted like it was no big deal. My dad joined in, saying they were allowed to use it because their names were on the paperwork. He made it sound like they had equal ownership, even though I paid for the car with my own money. The way they spoke felt rehearsed, like they had agreed beforehand on how to justify it. Instead of admitting they crossed a line, they tried to make it seem like I was overreacting. Their calm attitude made everything worse. It wasn't just the car they were trying to make me feel wrong for being upset. They acted like I was being dramatic for caring about something I worked years to earn. The more I asked why they didn't inform me, the more they twisted the conversation, calling me sensitive and unreasonable. That moment opened my eyes. They didn't take the car out of need, they took it because they assumed I would stay quiet, just like always. They used the cosign as a way to claim control, not as genuine support. Every excuse they gave showed they thought they had the right to take whatever they wanted from me. Standing there, listening to them defend something so clearly unfair, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice they made together. They didn't consider how it would affect me. They only cared about making things easy for Kira, even if it meant stepping all over me. I tried to stay calm, even though everything inside me was shaking. I told my parents they had until 6 in the evening to bring my car back. I said it clearly, without raising my voice, hoping they would finally understand that I was serious. They didn't argue much, which gave me a small bit of hope that maybe they would do the right thing this time. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself, but every hour felt heavier than the last. When the clock passed 6, I kept checking outside, waiting for the sound of the engine or a message saying they were on their way. Instead, my phone buzzed with a notification from social media. Kira had posted a picture of herself sitting in my driver's seat. She wasn't just using the car, she was bragging about it. She smiled at the camera with her friends in the background, acting like she owned it. The caption made my stomach twist. She treated my hard-earned car like a gift she deserved. I showed the post to my parents, expecting frustration or at least concern. Instead, they stayed completely relaxed. My mom said Kira was having fun and that I should stop worrying. My dad said she could keep it for the week because one car between two sisters wasn't a big deal. Their attitude felt unreal. They watched me work for years and still felt comfortable handing my things to someone who never contributed to anything. While I stood there trying to process their reaction, my dad stepped away to his room. His phone was left on the table, screen still lit. I didn't plan to look at it, but a message popped up right in front of me. It was from Kiera, and above her message was his reply. "Just keep it, sweetie. Sierra will get over it. We'll handle her." Reading those words felt like the floor dropped out from under me. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a last-minute decision. They had talked about this behind my back. They knew I wouldn't agree, so they acted first and planned to pressure me later. The car wasn't the only thing they took. They also took any remaining trust I had left. In that moment, something inside me went quiet. Not angry, not panicked, just clear. I finally saw how little they respected my effort, my voice, or my boundaries, and that clarity pushed me toward a decision I never imagined I would have to make. After seeing that message, something inside me stopped hoping they would change. I wasn't shaking or crying. Instead, a strange stillness settled over me, the kind that comes when you finally accept the truth you've avoided for too long. They weren't confused or desperate. They believed they had every right to take what belonged to me. To them, my effort meant nothing. My boundaries meant nothing. And if I stayed silent now, they would keep crossing every line without hesitation. I walked to my room and closed the door softly, not wanting to hear any more excuses. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor for a moment, letting everything settle in my mind. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about respect, control, and the way they had treated me my entire life. If I let this go, they would continue treating me like I didn't matter. I finally understood that I had to take action, not just for the car, but for myself. With steady hands, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. My voice came out calm and steady, almost disconnected from the storm inside me. I told the dispatcher my car had been taken without permission. I listed the details exactly as they needed: make, model, license plate number. Then I said the names of the people who took it: Dennis Blake, Valerie Blake, and Kira Blake. Saying their names in that context felt unreal, but it was the truth. The dispatcher asked a few standard questions, and I answered clearly, explaining that I had all the documents showing I paid for the car on my own. I made sure they understood that I hadn't given anyone permission to use it. There was no hesitation in my words because, for the first time, I felt like I was standing up for myself in a way that mattered. When the call ended, I leaned back and let out a long breath. I knew everything was about to change. There was no going back from this choice, but I didn't regret it. I had tried being patient, understanding, and cooperative for years, and it had only taught my parents to take advantage of me. This time, I refused to let them walk over me again. I sat there in the silence of my room, knowing the next few hours would shift my life in a direction none of us could undo. But for once, that thought didn't scare me. It felt like the beginning of something I should have done long ago. When the police located my car, everything began moving faster than I expected. I was still in my room when the dispatcher called back to confirm they had found it and were stopping the driver. I knew exactly who that driver was. I grabbed my bag, took a deep breath, and headed out the door. I wasn't sure what I would see, but I knew I needed to be there. When I arrived, 2 patrol cars were pulled over at a busy intersection. Lights were flashing, and people were slowing down to stare. Kira stood on the sidewalk near my car, crying as an officer spoke to her. She wasn't hurt. She was terrified because, for the first time, she was facing consequences no one could shield her from. Watching her sob brought a strange mix of emotions. I didn't feel satisfaction or victory. It just felt unreal, like I had stepped into a life that didn't belong to me. My parents appeared minutes later, rushing toward the scene in a panic. My dad's voice rang out the moment he saw me. He shouted that I had crossed a line, that I had ruined everything, that I was heartless. He didn't mention that they were the ones who took my car. He didn't acknowledge their choices. To him, the only thing that mattered was that I involved the police. My mom ran toward Kira, crying harder than she did at any family funeral. She kept begging the officers to release her daughter, insisting there was a misunderstanding. When the officers continued with their process, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face and asked how I could do this to them. Her words were sharp, full of pain, but also full of blame. She acted like they had been wronged, like I had attacked them without reason. I stayed focused. I handed my documents to the officer: registration, purchase papers, everything clearly showing I paid for the car with my own money. The officer looked through them and nodded calmly, confirming that I had provided exactly what they needed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply let the facts speak. My parents kept shouting, but the officers didn't let their noise interfere. They explained that taking a vehicle without permission was a serious offense, no matter who the person was. My dad tried pushing the idea that he had equal ownership, but the officer cut him off politely, saying the financial records didn't support his claim. As everything unfolded, I realized this moment wasn't about punishment. It was about finally drawing a boundary they couldn't bend. Watching it all happen hurt deeply. But I also knew there was no other way they would have ever understood that I deserved respect. The ride to the station felt heavy, but I stayed silent, focusing on the paperwork I had ready. Officer Greer met me at the entrance, a serious expression on her face. She asked me calmly if I was sure about pressing charges. I didn't hesitate. I explained that this wasn't a snap decision or a personal grudge. It was about them taking something that wasn't theirs and constantly disrespecting my boundaries. I told her that if this had been strangers or anyone else, the choice would have been obvious. Being their daughter didn't change the facts. Once inside, the process moved faster than I expected. My parents were brought in shortly after, handcuffed, and escorted past me. They were furious, shouting accusations and blaming me for exaggerating. Kira's face was pale and anxious. She avoided looking at me, probably realizing for the first time that no one could shield her from the consequences this time. I stayed calm and collected, presenting Officer Greer with all the documents proving ownership, purchase receipts, registration, and proof of payment. Every piece of evidence backed up my story. The officer reviewed everything thoroughly, checking names, dates, and signatures. I watched my parents trying to argue, waving their hands, insisting that co-signing meant they had a say. But Officer Greer remained firm, explaining clearly that co-signing for a loan doesn't give permission to take the car without the owner's consent. My parents tried twisting the conversation into guilt and emotion, but it didn't work here. The facts were on my side. After the paperwork was completed, my parents were booked and released with instructions to appear in court. Kira was given a stern warning and released as well. I could see the shock on their faces. They had never faced real consequences before. My extended family, of course, received their version of the story immediately. In messages and calls, they painted me as irrational and vengeful, as if defending my own property and rights was a character flaw. It stung, but I couldn't let their opinions sway me this time. I had already lived through years of favoritism, gaslighting, and excuses. Sitting in the waiting area afterward, I felt a strange mix of relief and heaviness. Relief because I had finally taken action for myself, standing up against people who had always taken advantage of me. Heaviness because I knew this would forever change family dynamics. But for the first time, I realized I wasn't acting out of anger. I was acting out of necessity, protecting myself, my belongings, and my boundaries from the very people who should have respected them. It was difficult, but it felt right. After the police matter, the reality of what I had done started to sink in. Calls from family poured in, but they weren't comforting. My Aunt Marlene lectured me, saying I had gone too far, that I should have handled things differently. My grandparents echoed the same sentiment, insisting that forgiveness was the only proper way forward. I listened, nodding politely, but inside I felt nothing but clarity. I couldn't let their opinions change what I knew was right. For years, my parents had crossed lines, ignored boundaries, and treated me like I was invisible. This was different. It was about finally standing up for myself. Liam became my anchor through all of it. He didn't question my choice, didn't try to soften the situation. Instead, he offered practical support. When my parents' anger left me with nowhere to stay, his family welcomed me with open arms. I had a safe place to regroup, think, and plan the next steps without constant interference. It was comforting in a way I hadn't realized I needed. Being away from my parents' house, even briefly, gave me a perspective I hadn't had in years. I could see how toxic the environment had been, and how much space I now had to reclaim my life. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office moved quickly. They reviewed the documents, receipts, and registration details I had carefully kept. The co-owner argument my parents kept repeating held no ground against clear evidence of payment and ownership. The legal team outlined a plea deal. They could admit guilt, return the car fully to me, and complete community service to resolve the situation quickly. It was a fair offer, meant to avoid prolonged court proceedings, but my parents refused. They claimed it was a matter of principle, shocking even their own lawyer. Watching them dig in so stubbornly, knowing they were clearly in the wrong, was both frustrating and vindicating. I realized they cared more about ego than resolving the problem. Through all of this, I began to understand that isolation wasn't a punishment, it was protection. I had separated myself from toxic influence and created space to make decisions freely. While some family members criticized me, others silently supported my choice. I had faced the betrayal, acted decisively, and stood firm. And in that quiet, even in isolation, I finally felt the weight of my own independence, knowing I was defending what was rightfully mine. The trial day arrived faster than I expected, and the nerves I had felt all week gave way to determination. I knew this was more than just about a car. It was about standing up to a lifetime of disrespect and being taken for granted. Walking into the courtroom, I felt the weight of years of frustration, but also a strange sense of relief. For once, I was no longer silent. I could finally tell the truth and let the facts speak for themselves. Sitting at the witness stand, I gave my testimony clearly and calmly. I recounted the events, the messages, and the repeated favoritism that had led to this point. I presented all the documents I had carefully kept: purchase receipts, registration papers, and proof that the car was entirely mine. The jury listened quietly, occasionally exchanging glances that I couldn't interpret, but I sensed their attention. I wasn't trying to punish my parents out of spite. I was simply showing what had happened, step by step. Watching my parents from the stand was surreal. Their faces went through every shade of shock, anger, and frustration. They tried to argue, to cast doubt, but the evidence was clear, and their own words were part of the record. I noticed the jury's expressions, the subtle disapproval, the disbelief that people could act so entitled toward their own child. That alone felt like a small victory. Finally, the scales were tipping in my favor, not because of revenge, but because of truth. When the verdict came, all three were convicted of misdemeanor unauthorized use of a vehicle. It wasn't a huge punishment, but it was official. They now had records, and my car was fully mine. The relief I felt was immense. No more uncertainty, no more silent frustration, no more living under the shadow of their control. I moved in with Liam, feeling lighter and freer than I had in years. My car, a symbol of my independence, was finally secured, and with it came a sense of reclaiming my life. The emotional wounds haven't fully healed, and the betrayal still stings. But I've learned that protecting yourself sometimes means letting go of people you were taught to honor unconditionally. The family I grew up with took what was mine, but the life I'm building now is based on respect, trust, and genuine care. I've created a space where I am valued and safe, and that freedom is worth more than anything they could ever take from me. Do you think I did the right thing by standing up to my parents and pressing charges, or should I have forgiven them? I really want to hear your thoughts. For more stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications.